Hello. Today we finally will start investigating the Sveshnikov variation. So in this position, e5, Black is playing. Well, what can I say? Very interesting variation. I played it a lot since my childhood. I think my first game I played Sveshnikov when I was 12 years old, and played it almost till the end of my chess career. Nowadays, actually, it's one of the main weapons of Magnus Carlsen, who prepared this variation for his World Championship match against Fabiano Caruana, and actually had a very good outcome with Black in this system. It's very dynamic. Well, quite rarely actually in the openings you as Black, you have positions with initiative. Okay, Black of course has a weak d5 square, but otherwise, strangely enough, quite often he's got initiative. Actually, and it's nice to play with initiative, especially having Black pieces. So I know it pretty well, of course, and I will try to, since it's a very important part of the opening theory in the Sicilian. So I will try to give you the overview from A to Z of all possible lines here. I believe that in general Black is doing really well in Sveshnikov. In the modern state of theory, it's very difficult for White to get any real advantage, and that is one of the reasons why the third move bishop b5 after knight c6 is becoming more and more popular, because Sveshnikov is actually a difficult hard nut to crack. So today we are going to consider all sidelines for White after e5, because I would say that definitely the main position of Sveshnikov is this one, which by the way also can happen via different move orders. If you remember the previous lesson with e6, so you can have the same position as well, and this one we will consider later, but for today let's check after e5 what are the options. Knight db5 is definitely the best move. Other moves do not give White anything at all. So if knight f5, then d5 is a very easy equality. E takes d5, bishop takes f5, d takes e6, and now in fact I think queen takes d1 check is also quite simple. Knight takes d1, b takes c6, knight e3, and bishop g6. Also bishop e6 is fine, and this endgame, White has some structural advantage, but black is more active actually, and so a typical situation for Sveshnikov in any case. In most of the lines it's the same story. White has a better pawn structure, but Black has very active pieces. So that is good enough, but maybe even simpler is b takes c6, and now the only way according to the theory for White to fight for something is to play queen f3, queen d7, bishop c4, bishop e7, and it's just an equal position. So knight f5 is completely harmless, but at least quite safe. Of course, knight b3 or knight f3 are not good options, because bishop b4 comes and Black has attacking the pawn on e4, also preparing d5, so White can barely equalize me here. Recently there was a game, I think Veselin Topalov played knight d2 here. I think it's more the idea was just to surprise the opponent. Black can play bishop b4, e3, bishop a5. I think it's quite fine, but the most logical is just to play bishop c5. At least White can get a game here. Knight g3, for instance, castles, bishop c4, I suppose, d6. I think the position is just equal. Black, I don't see any problem for black, because his bishop on c5 is very active, and knight on g3 is a bit strange. But at least white can play this position, but definitely no more than that. Black is perfectly fine. So then knight db5, d6. Well, black was trying some h6 move here, but this really doesn't look good because of, well, quite a number of reasons. I suppose knight d5 even is good, but anyway, h6 is just it's too much. So d6 is definitely the best move in this position. And now, we will consider during this lesson all moves but bishop g5. I think the only real attempt to fight for something with white is to play knight d5, a move which is becoming very popular nowadays. Maybe not actually because it's so strong, but because the main lines are in certain crisis for white. And after knight d5, at least white can get a game. It's a complicated playable position where white has still some chances to be slightly better, but at least you can, you can get a game, which sometimes more difficult to manage after bishop g5. And but first I would, let's check the other moves. Bishop e3 is a, strange move. But if you want to play with black, I wouldn't recommend it for white. But if you are black, then you just need to know that after a6, knight a3, actually b5 is an old recipe to equalize knight d5, rook b8 now, because bishop b6 was threatening, and probably it's good enough. But nowadays engines are actually playing even better, playing rook b8, and here white is already suffering trying to equalize, because now b5 is a threat. Knight c4 doesn't really work because b5 comes and you have to retreat to d2, which is of course not good at all. So after rook b8, the idea is that after, white probably has to play knight d5. Maybe he can also play finally bishop g5, change his mind, but then black is playing b5, and of course rook b8 is a very useful move. So also doesn't make much sense. And after knight d5, black can simply take, and ed knight e7 followed by knight f5. And if somebody is fighting for something here, it's probably black already. So bishop e3 is not posing any problems. Then another move is a4. That is playable, I would say. It doesn't actually give white anything, of course. I used to play it actually in my childhood. This a4 move, at least after a6, knight a3, white stops b5. So the knight will potentially can manage to get to c4, e3, but all this is just wishful thinking, because black, I think bishop e7 is a used to be a main theoretical move, and it's perfectly okay. But I would recommend bishop g4. I think it's almost a refutation of a4 move, because now white doesn't have a slightest chance for opening advantage, and even can get slightly worse actually under some circumstances, because the idea is that if bishop e2, then black simply takes and plays d5, and of course he cannot have any problem. So f3 has to be played, but that is pretty weakening f3 move, because after bishop e6, white doesn't really have time to get his knight from a3 to d5 here. Black already wants to play d5, so let's say bishop c4, and now black is fine in different ways. The simplest is probably knight b4, even though rook c8 is also perfectly fine. The idea is that in case of knight d5, knight e7 looks a little bit strange, but actually after knight f6, gf6, let's say take on s6, f takes e6, black has a very powerful center, and the knight on a3, as you can see, is out of place. So black will probably just push d5 next, and it's clear that it's only black who can fight for advantage here. Or let's say in case of castle, also again more than one way to be fine, but knight e7 is an interesting move, which is approved by engines. Actually, it's a proposal of computers, because humanly it looks strange, but actually black is fighting for the d5 square, and also again leaving this knight on a3 well, for quite a while on the edge of the board. So let's say queen e2, queen c7, and if bishop b3, black can already play d5 with a very good position. So rook c8 is perfectly fine. Also knight b4 is a good move, just again preparing d5. And in case of bishop g5, queen c7 looks pretty good. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes c4 now. And let's say bishop h4, rook c8, black has no problem whatsoever here, because a knight on b4 is very powerful. I mean, it's controlling the d5 square, putting some pressure on the c2 pawn, so white cannot really make use of this d5 weakness, black's weakness. So black is at least equal in this position. So a4, I would say that I don't see a slightest idea for white after bishop g4. Black is just solving all his problems immediately. So a4, again, I don't see any sense of playing a4 with white, because well, unfortunately for white, it's not only bishop g4 which is easily equalizing, but actually after bishop g4 it's already white who has to be careful not to get slightly worse. So then of course bishop g5 is the main move, but then knight d5 is remaining possibility for white, but that is very serious, knight d5. So actually there was a discussion in this World Championship match between Fabiano Caruana and Magnus Carlsen. There were a few games played with knight d5. I actually analyzed quite a lot this knight d5 line, because I've played a candidate match against Leonid Yudasin in 1994, if I remember well, and he used to play this knight d5 system a lot. So I remember I was preparing for this match and analyzed, well, as of course without engines, we didn't have engines at that time, so just over the board. And I already at that time I realized that this move is more dangerous than it was supposed to be, because well, in the 90s knight d5 was just a sideline, equal position, and no problem at all for black. I realized that it has much more venom than it was considered at that time. But again, nowadays engines are helping a lot, and I think that black finally, well, I wouldn't worry at all actually playing black, but still you need to know quite some theory, because since again this move became very popular lately, so the theory developed, and there's quite a number of lines. Some of them are quite direct, so you need to know something here. But what is reassuring for black, that black has a choice. I mean, it's not like black has to make only moves here. No, black has a choice, and I believe that after knight takes d5 is forced, e takes d5, and now both moves, knight b8 and knight e7, I think they're both good enough to get a very decent playable position, complicated, I would say double edge position out of the opening. So it's, well, kind of matter of choice, matter of taste, whether you like to play knight b8 or knight e7, or maybe after this lesson I will explain you the main ideas and the main critical positions after both of those moves, so you can probably play it both, just depending on the opponent, on your mood, but I believe that objectively more or less equal moves. By strengths, it just conceptually very different. Knight b8 is the game gets more positional, more strategic. Knight b8 is safer, but gives white more ideas, more opportunities to fight for advantage. Knight e7 is more direct move. After knight e7 you need to, well, the game gets very often gets pretty sharp, and you need to know move per move the theory, which is not really actually the case. After knight b8 you can more or less just play this position. So anyway, let's maybe start with knight b8 with a more positional approach. So after knight b8, black wants to play a6, and white, well, always practically used to play c4, and only lately, last few years, a4 actually started even to be more popular, and now maybe it can be considered as the main move in this position. So c4, of course, white wants just to develop and to start playing on the queen side, maybe slowly pushing pawns. He has a bit of a space advantage, and black is usually trying to organize his counterplay on the king side, trying to play knight d7, bishop e7, castle f5, and a very typical Sicilian structure, actually. The only thing, bishop e7 is the best move, because actually a6 is a mistake, and I think if I'm not mistaken, that's what I played once in 1992, good old days. I didn't know the correct move order. I played a6 against Finnish Grandmaster Vesterinen in Gausdal Open, and he went queen a4, and I realized that I'm in some kind of a trouble, because if bishop d7, queen a3 is very unpleasant, and which practically forces black to give up his bishop for the knight, and here white is just better. And after knight d7, white has c5 move. Even though, by the way, it's maybe after dc5, maybe black is actually holding here. d6, ab. You have to sacrifice an exchange, takes on a8, takes on d6, takes on b5, when black castles, and black has maybe just almost enough compensation for the exchange. I think I played rook b8 here instead. Now the knight is hanging, and after knight d6, bishop d6, cd, castled, and then, slowly managed to take the pawn back, and actually won the game finally. But I think white is better here objectively, so just in case, better not to allow it to play bishop e7, because the only difference is that white has a c5 move, which is not too dangerous. Castle, cd, bishop d6, and I believe there was a game, if I remember correctly, again, Vashyela Graf with Giri a couple of years ago they played, and actually at some point Vashyela was already much better, but I remember well analyzing this position, and you can check it with engines. They find a very clear and straightforward way to equalize here with black. I mean, it's not very dangerous. Maybe it's like a surprise weapon for one game, but no more than that. Normally white's best is probably to put bishop on d3. Here having bishop on e2 I think doesn't actually cause any trouble for black. Castles, castle, knight d7, so the same type of play. King h1, this is a very typical move in this position, because at some point white will have to push his f pawn, let's say a6, knight c3, f5, and now, black wants to play e4, bishop f6, knight e5, and he can easily be better if he manages so. Therefore white in advance playing king h1 in order to to push his pawn now, f4 or f3. But let's say in case of f3, many ways for black to be okay. Bishop g5 is very typical move, and in this position I think white has more chances for something, at least having bishop on d3. The bishop is more active there. By the way, black can also play a move like instead of bishop g5, like a5, maybe followed by b6. It's a slow positional game. White cannot really break through on the queen side. I would say position is complicated and approximately equal. Or here already with a bishop on e2, maybe white can try f4 also. But now bishop f6, and then black very often takes on f4 and playing bishop e5 on knight e5, then develops his bishop to d7. Again, a very typical Sicilian position. I don't see why black should be any worse than white in this position, just a equal complicated game. So I believe bishop d3 is a better try for white. Castles. Again, black has some options. I think a move bishop d7 was played also in this position. It's another setup. White's best is a4, and maybe still with some chances for a slight edge. But I don't see anything wrong with a normal way of playing, like a6. Already now knight c3, f5. So here white wants to put pawn on f3. Knight d7, and now just well, also it's not so easy for black to develop his counterplay really, seriously. So it's very positional game. White has, what are the options? One of the options is to play bishop e3 with the idea after bishop g5 to play bishop f2. You're trying to keep these bishops. Because the bishop on this diagonal on f2 can be very helpful in order to push the pawns on the queen side, maybe b4 c5 one day. But here black is also having his counterplay. For instance, even bishop h4 actually is interesting, because well, white's plan is to try to keep the bishops on the board. Then he has to play g3 and coming back to g5, and actually g3 is quite a weakening move. So black's counterplay now on the king side can get really dangerous. But also queen f6 is I quite like queen f6 move, because you stop advance of the pawns, because before e4 comes, the the knight is hanging on c3, and also probably black wants to put queen on h6, and maybe the knight f6, knight h5, and the counterplay can really become dangerous. So this I don't really like for white. I think the main move is king h1 in this position. Bishop g5. Again, black, as I mentioned already, black can play a move like b6. Then at least white maybe might try to play bishop e3, and then bishop to g1, so the king is at least safer now, white's king. And again, trying slowly to organize some pawn play on the queen side, but black always has his own counterplay in such positions, so still it's not clear if white has anything. But bishop g5 is more direct move. It's a strategical idea also for black to change these bishops and to have some control on the black squares. Let's say b4 is one of the options, and now if black wants, after b4 he can go into a very direct line, and I think it's enough to equalize, which is a5, but I'm not sure b6 that there is anything wrong with b6 move. And then black slowly starts to organize his play on the king side. But a5, now the game gets very direct. a3, well, it works tactically, because after ab, white takes on g5 and ab, and rook a1, queen a1, and I think queen e3 is an important move. This is, by the way, an old theory. I remember still actually analyzing this position, I think in the 90s. I believe for the match with Udasin, I already had this position on the board. And after, let's say, bishop e2, I think that knight b8 was a strange but very good maneuver. And then trying to play knight a6, actually, well, paving the way for the bishop on c8, and also attacking the pawn on b4. And black was fine here. I remember finally it was leading to a more or less drawish position. So king h1, black also has a choice. I think lately also white started to play a3 and simply, let's say, bishop g5, b4. But again, black can always play b6. I mean, white is not really breaking through on the king side, so more like gaining space and slowly trying to regroup pieces. But I never really worried about such positions. I mean, I don't see why black should be worse here. Just a normal playable position. But again, at least with white, I mean, you can also play. Yeah, it's a game, complicated strategical game, and for some people, some chess players who like this type of position, it's definitely, even if it's equal, but it's definitely playable for white. So that's why the knight d5 move was, in general, considered to be leading nowhere really for white. I mean, not really challenging black's Sveshnikov system. I mean, black's move e5 and leading to an equal complicated game. But this a4 lately, this totally different setup, which actually I played myself, I believe during in the Olympiad Batumi 2018, and won a game with white with a4. And since then, this setup started to be more and more popular. And now it's probably the main move, a4. So what is the idea? The idea is that white just wants to develop. And then, in case if black is playing a6, then white would retreat with a knight to a3, go into c4, a5, and having a little bit, I mean, the same strategical idea of playing on the queen side, but in a different fashion. And actually, it's not so easy for black here, but with time, and especially with efforts of Magnus Carlsen, I think he knows exactly how to play against a4. So in general, of course, is very well prepared, and of course an amazing player, understanding of the position. So if you want to pick up this opening in your repertoire with black, I mean, definitely first thing you should do is to study games of Magnus Carlsen in Sveshnikov, and in this variation in particular. He actually plays both knight b8 and knight e7. So after knight b8, a4, bishop e7, bishop e2, castles. I saw also white was starting with bishop d2 also in some games, but it's a little bit too refined for me. So I think white will probably castle anyway sooner or later. So castles, knight d7, and now white has a choice. Actually, my idea with white when I played it was to play king h1 in this position. So the point is that, let's say, a6, knight a3 will be played sooner or later. The point is to meet f5 with f4, and then trying to play knight c4, because e4 strategically is not so good in this position, because white gets squares, bishop on e3, c3, knight c4, a5. Black doesn't really have so much counterplay with this very important position of the pawn on f4, which is stopping black's counterplay. So e4 I wouldn't recommend. And in case of ef, for instance, then white is, well, also starting to press the d6 pawn, let's say knight c5, knight c4, queen c7. And now, for example, rook a3 is quite a nice maneuver. So rook is getting somewhere to e3. And maybe black is holding here, but okay, white setup is very healthy and strategically looks good. All his pieces are in good places. So, I mean, black still has to prove that he is fine, that he had equalized here. Well, the only thing that I noticed that modern engines, they give G5 move here as the first line, and in fact it's true that it makes sense. Actually, I don't think I've studied this move when preparing this variation with white, but it might be a very interesting option. So f5, f4, g5 is interesting, but Magnus, I think he played knight c5. This is pretty direct. Knight c4 has to be played, and now a5, an important move just to stop white from advancing on the queen side. So let's say like a5, then next b4, knight b6, c4 potentially. So a5 is of course weakening a bit the b5 square, but it's not so important. The most important is that black stops white's play on the queen side, and then f4 looks logical because white also has another plan, is trying to play in the center. ef4, bishop f4, and now an important move, f5. Black wants to secure somewhere in some variations e4 square for his knight, and also preparing maybe g5, f4, bishop f5, this kind of active play. And well, probably black is perfectly fine here after queen d2, b6, rook a1, and the last important nuance, bishop a6, pinning the knight somehow, b3 for instance, trying to, well, just protecting the pawn on a4, and now knight e4 and so on. Well, black can easily at some point take on c4 and then activate his bishop via f6, a complicated equal position. So king h1 is probably not so dangerous, but in the World Championship match, Fabiano tried another moves. I think he tried both b4 and bishop d2. b4 looks really strange, this move, because, for instance, black can actually damage white's pawn structure, but somehow white just takes on a5, and well, in exchange he gets a very powerful square b5 for his knight, and I'm not sure if it's so clear, this position, but at least engines are given some small plus for white. One thing I want to explain you here, that for whatever color you're playing it, especially if you play with white, very often at the beginning engines are given some small plus for white, in quite often almost after every move, but actually it doesn't mean, in this particular variation, doesn't mean at all that white is any better, because then very often when you start to analyze it, going deeper, and then it starts to drop the assessment and finally saying that black is perfectly fine. So don't judge too quickly if you see some 0-3 here or this kind of assessment. It doesn't mean much, because black has a long-term counterplay, and sometimes it's really dangerous, his play on the king side. So here after b4, a6 probably the best move, knight a3. And now I don't know if after here already better to play a5, probably after a6 to get this knight from b5, out of b5 square. At least now white's knight gets to c4, queen c7, a5, and let's say f5. Again, I think that engines given a small plus for white here, but I mean, at least in a practical game, very unclear position, and black definitely has his counter chances also. So that is one way to play with black. Another way is just to ignore and to play f5. That's a bit more risky strategically and probably requires some more preparation, because a5 and e4, so going very quickly for the counterplay, knight c4, and now for instance f4 is a possible move, and actually game gets extremely complicated. I think white can play a move like rook a3 here. It's a real mess on the board. So b4 is an interesting try, but also, yeah, in general black should be doing fine here. And then another attempt is bishop d2. Bishop d2, so white just wants to push his pawns. I mean, the idea is that of course he would like to play a5, but after a6 cannot white cannot retreat to a3, because that is his plan, to trying to get the knight to c4 and then potentially entering on b6, but because here black can just take the pawn. So actually the idea of the bishop d2 move is preparing a5 and then this setup, knight a3, knight c4, when black will play a6. So let's say a6 here, knight a3. And again, now black has a choice of trying to stop white from advancing on the queen side by playing a5. And I think that was what Magnus Carlsen also played once. But also f5 is not so clear. I mean, a5, e4, knight c4, knight e5. With a, again, very strange position, which is difficult to assess. For example, after knight takes e5, d5, we have a really original pawn structure, very double-edged. So probably f5 is good enough for black to just to have a complicated and clear game. But a5, I personally like a5 here, just, you know, just to be strategically, it looks a bit more sound strategically, a5. And now, yeah, I couldn't really find, I looked at this position a bit, couldn't really find anything for white. For example, if knight c4, then black is just playing b6, trying to secure the c5 square for his knight. And let's say f4, and what else? Already now it seems like white has to start playing in the center, but after ef, bishop f4, knight c5, again the position is unclear, double-edged. Both sides has his own pluses and minuses. I would say probably it's about equal, dynamic equality. And in case of f4 immediately, first of all, f5 is also possible, but I think computers are showing some knight b6, some strange move, knight b6, a tactical idea, trying to attack the pawn on d5. And after c4, bishop f6, and some variations, the game starts to get pretty direct here. And at the end of the day, as always, in such situations, finally it ends in an equal position, and with the best play of both opponents, probably it will end in a draw after some simplifications, but also with some tactics involved. So all in all, as you can see, there is nothing wrong at all with a knight b8 move with black. I mean, it's perfectly playable. There is no real advantage for white, but the game is slow and it's very positional, so white can also try to outplay his opponent in this complicated strategical game. So therefore, if you like the game to get more direct, more like Sicilian, real Sicilian, then knight e7 is, I can recommend you to play knight e7 because the game gets here rather direct and a bit more tactical than after knight b8. So in a way, knight e7 is more logical, of course, because knight immediately is transferred to the king side, and this is the area where black is going to create his play. So then white, probably the only chance for white to fight for an advantage is to play c4 already here, because the same plan with a4 is already quite harmless, because black gets the knight whether on g6 to g6 or f5 or knight g6, bishop e7, f5. And actually, with having this knight close to the white's king can really get quite dangerous for white, the position, because he can never play f4, for example. So that is already, this plan doesn't make much sense. c3 is possible, actually, the possible move. c3 now, now you shouldn't actually play knight g6 automatically, because looks very normal, very logical move, but there is a certain issue after queen a4, just tactically, yeah, because the only move is bishop d7, queen b4 now attacking the d6 pawn, and in fact black has to give up his bishop, because after or play queen b8, let's say now queen c4. threatening knight c7 check, so probably black has nothing better than to play king d8, and even if it's not yet completely dramatic, but obviously it doesn't look great, having the king on d8 and queen on b8. Or in case of bishop f5, now white plays queen c4, rook c8 has to be played, and finally queen a4 back. A strange maneuver, but after bishop d7, now white is just taking the a7 pawn. So knight g6 leads to advantage for white. So queen a4 actually is a threat now, yeah? Of course, also a6 is bad because of queen a4. So you have to watch out here. Knight f5 was always considered to be practically only move in this position, and it's a good move. But I just want to mention that there is another move, f5 here, with the idea if queen a4, and that is the point of the c3 move. That's why not c4, even though c4 is the main line, but white with the move c3 preparing queen a4, and white wants to keep the c4 square for his queen, just for these tactical reasons, having in mind knight c7 threat. So queen a4, but here king f7 is possible, and let's say queen b4 is attacking the d6 pawn, and knight g8. A strange setup. The knight goes to f6, bishop goes to e7. I mean, of both sides lost some tempers. White moving his queen, black actually getting the knight to g8, followed by knight f6. I remember that I analyzed it long ago also, and I still thought I didn't really like it for black so much. I thought that white can be somewhat better in this position. So that's why it's just an interesting idea. I mean, it's playable, but I would rather recommend you knight f5. I don't see a problem actually after knight f5 for black. Now black already wants to play a6, because after queen a4 he will definitely just have bishop d7 move. Therefore a4 is usually played. Again, this typical idea that after a6, knight a3, black cannot play b5. Yeah, so the knight can get to c4, a5, knight b6 is a typical play. And here I think black is fine after both bishop e7 and another g6 move. Again, I think this is what I played in my match against Udas in 1994 in Vaikanzea, candidate match, my first ever World Championship cycle. And I won, it was the first game, I think, of the match. I won a very nice game, but I am not sure if totally equalized out of the opening. Still, modern engines find this position perfectly okay for black. I mean, of course, bishop on g7 is much more active than on e7, but the only minus is that d6 pawn becomes more vulnerable. Yeah, white sometimes wants to attack it with queen by means of queen b4, but engines are holding pretty well. Rook e8, rook e1, bishop d7, and probably it's just equal the position, complicated equal position. So g6 is perfectly playable, but also bishop e7. I don't see any problem after bishop e7. Bishop d3 is usually played, castles, and now there was an old theory, knight h4 was the main move always, and again I think I won a game here in the Junior World Championship 1991. I think I won quite quickly with black here, and probably it equalizes, but here white has some chances for opening advantage. The theory goes like this: f4, a6, knight a3, ef, bishop f4, knight g6, bishop g3. So white is already very close to start pressing positionally. If he just manages knight c4 followed by a5, knight b6, well, it will not be very pleasant black's position. But knight e5 is played now, and there is still some more theory still goes on, and finally it seems that black manages to equalize here. But after knight h4, black is just trying to play for equality and doesn't really have many chances after this f4 to fight for initiative. But nowadays engines are very happy with the bishop d7 move, and yeah, I also analyzed while preparing this course, I analyzed a bit this position, and I really cannot see absolutely anything for white here. I mean, black has a healthy play. Of course, this move was considered to be a bit dubious because of f4. So you see knight on f5 is a little bit shaky, but well, maybe for humans, not for computers. Engine just playing a6, knight a3, and now g6. Just protecting the knight, and actually black has quite a serious counterplay here, and with b5, yeah, because for instance if knight c4, black always has b5, and queen f3 is the main line of the engines, and now again still b5 is possible, and it's completely fine for black. Actually engines are already starting to give a slight preference to black in this position. I mean, that is also very, very nice, easy equality. So c3 is completely harmless, in my opinion, after knight f5. So that's why c4. Here already knight f5 is not the same. I mean, here white has considerable chances for some advantage playing bishop d3, because the knight retreats to c3. Now after a6, and a6 will be played sooner or later. So let's say castle, f4, already a6, knight c3, and yeah, the knight on f5 here, the knight is really starts to be quite shaky on f5, and even if still this position is playable for black, but I believe white has a very nice initiative. So that's why if white is playing c4, now already knight g6. Yeah, it's you better don't confuse. Yeah, if c3, then knight g6 is not good, you play knight f5. If c4, knight f5 is already not so good, you play knight g6, and not the other way around. So knight g6. Now, in general, of course, g6 square is more comfortable for the knight here than f5, because black just wants to play bishop e7, castle f5. It's just that after c3, tactically knight f5, queen a4 was a problem. Yeah, here it's not a problem because white doesn't have the c4 square for his queen. So here, what of course, if you just play quietly bishop e2, this is even much better version than knight b8 variation, where the knight was on d7. Knight is very good on g6. Black will castle, play f5, and I think white has to be careful already. So that is not an option. I mean, here white practically doesn't have any real options to fight for anything than to start quite direct play with a queen a4. This is the main move. It's also possible to start with h4, but first of all, I'm not sure, even if black plays a move like h5, that white will gain much. But this might be the case. Maybe bishop e2, g3, trying to attack the pawn on h5. But actually h4, a6 is quite good. Knight c3 has to be played. And now bishop e7. I think this is the simplest. Because h5, knight h4, it only looks a little bit strange, this knight on h4. But also white is weakening pretty much his position. The king is still in the center. So there is also quite some risk for white to get worse in this position. So let's say c5 is a possible option. Castles, h6, g6, with a very complicated position. But frankly, I would rather take black here because he's better mobilized, and even if it's objectively equal, I think black has some practical initiative here. So that's why queen a4, I believe, is the best move, and that's the move I played myself in that game. Bishop d7, queen b4, so the same idea. Now if bishop f5, h4 is quite unpleasant, so better to start with queen b8. So you see the difference is that with the pawn on c3, white had a very, very unpleasant resource, queen c4. Here he doesn't have this resource, so queen b8 is fine. And h4, that is the main point of white's play, because again, Otherwise, if white would just develop, black develops and castles a6, f5, and probably very quickly black will take the initiative. So the whole idea is very tactical, is to play h4, and the justification is that after a6, h5 is very unpleasant, and after a bsg, white is better. So h4, h5. I think that my opponent, he didn't play h5, and he actually got worse in the game. Nowadays, black is playing h5, and this position, again, it's very, you need to analyze it very accurately, because it's strange, it's a bit strange, and also it's very double-edged. So white skin is in the center for the moment, black, by the way, also. So somewhere the pawn on h5 is hanging. In some cases, black organizes a very quick and dangerous counterplay. But at least according to the latest games, I think there was an important game, Shaklan-Pragnananda, pretty recently. It seems that black is in time to have enough, to have his counterplay. Bishop e2 is the main move. Or you can start with bishop e3, but it doesn't change much, because it will probably get to the same position, more or less the same situation. So normally bishop e2 is a6, knight c3, bishop e7, g3. So that is the idea, that black cannot really castle, because the h5 pawn is hanging, and white wants to develop bishop to e3 and start to maybe to make use of the b6 square. And now engines are creative modern engines, they find a very nice way to create counterplay, playing b5, and that is what was already played in a couple of games, including, I think, that game which I've mentioned. So b5, all of a sudden black starts his counterplay from the other side, sacrificing the pawn, cbab. Black also has a very, very unpleasant maneuver in his pocket, which is bishop d8, bishop a5, or bishop d8, bishop b6, bishop c5. So white usually takes on b5, and now castles. Okay, very computerish play, a4 and f5 now, sacrificing the second pawn. And this position, I think it actually appeared already, at least in one game of top players. I've checked it with engine. Engine shows that it's extremely sharp and complicated, but finally assessing it as equal, this position. So dynamic balance. If you play black, if you decide to play 97 variation with black and to play it exactly in this fashion, which I believe the best after 97 c4, maybe the only way to get a decent position out of the opening is to play knight g6 and followed by queen b8, h5 and b5. But it seems that it holds. It seems that black is okay here, and it's difficult also to see where white can improve his play. So if this position is fine, then maybe 97 is even simpler way to get a good game against the knight d5 system. But again, I would like to repeat that knight b8 is also perfectly fine. So this system is playable for white again, because the game is not so direct as in the main lines of Sveshnikov. So here there are some ideas here and there. You can try just to play this position at the end of the day. Just to play it without complications, without driving your queen to b4, castle and play. But especially with a knight on g6, I don't think black will experience problems. So if I would say that finally after knight b8, white can definitely get a game. In case of knight e7, if you want to play this variation with white, then you need to analyze this position and this play. This very direct play with knight g6 and h5. And if you find some, if not advantage, but at least some interesting practical idea with white for one game, then definitely you can have it in your repertoire, this knight d5 plan, but again, of course, it's completely clear it's not going to be a refutation of Sveshnikov. I mean, it's clear that for me, I'm sure that black objectively has enough resources to equalize in the knight d5 system, but yeah, the position is complicated, and black has to be also careful and to understand the typical ideas of this pawn structure, and then probably adding to it a certain theoretical knowledge of concrete lines, and probably black shouldn't worry at all about this knight d5 system. So for this lesson, that's it, and we will move to the main move, to the main line of Sveshnikov, which is after d6, bishop g5. And first I would show you, well, I would say a6, knight a3, b5 is definitely the best way for black to play. And there are two systems. One is bishop takes f6, that will be one separate lesson, bishop takes f6, because black has to take with a pawn if he wants to fight for equality, and then the game gets very sharp and dynamic. Another system is more positional. White can play knight d5, the best is bishop e7, and probably taking on f6 is the best. And here it's it's very solid for white, this play. So that will be a subject of our next lesson. So this position after bishop g5, a6, knight a3, b5, and knight d5. And then finally we will also investigate bishop takes f6, gf, this play. Okay, so I think that I've shown all reasonable side lines. Actually, that is, by the way, quite a problem for white Sveshnikov, because there are not so many more or less reasonable ideas, which is, well, for example, in Taimanov or another system, well, another black system of Sicilian, white has usually quite a choice of different systems. Maybe some of them are more challenging, some less, but still playable. Here in Sveshnikov, the choice is quite limited for white. So here I don't see any idea for white than bishop g5. The rest we have checked. So let's investigate the main position, the main line, this bishop g5, and one by one we will sterilize Sveshnikov, and you will be able to play it with black, definitely, I'm sure, because it's objectively doing well. But I also will try my best to give you certain ideas for white color, what can be dangerous, and in which of those lines black has to be careful and maybe find some very, very precise only moves to finally to manage to equalize.